Okay, people, 1, 2, 3, check, check. We are back and we are live right now. Incredible. And that's me. Yeah. Colin Rivers on the Colin Rivers show today. Yeah. I got a bit leaner. I'm more beautiful for you guys and girls. We are in carnivore diet now. Full carnivore diet. And we have Leo Zagami in a few moments talking about the rise and fall of a Frankenstein monster, exposing Jeffrey Epstein and the most powerful Jewish sect in the world. This is going to be an amazing show. You're going to learn a lot with our friend Leo Zagami. So don't go away. Don't go away, people. Yeah. And pleased to meet you, everyone, that you're joining the show, the Alex Jones show, or the Leo Zagami show. And the rise and fall of Jeffrey Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell, you know, what was between these guys. Ghislaine's father was already a very renowned boss in the UK, and they've been talked about in every way possible in the last few years. But this is the first time, historically speaking, social, politically speaking, and religiously speaking, about the answers to be the key players of this whole network and where do they come from. And the Abrahamic religions and Canadian movement of these students and Judaism. And for that, we have on the other side of the ocean our friend, il nostro amigo, il grande Leo Zagami. Wow.
Thank you for the introduction. Colin, it's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. So thank you for having me on. Today, of course, we are going to be discussing a new book. I hope that we can maybe in the future discuss it also with our friend Rafa Pab, because I think that we will have some adding to the present show.
Rafa Pab, because he said his English was not up to the standards of Alex Jones show and Leo Zagami show. I said in Colin Rivers show we can even translate. It's no problem. We had before this, and remember, you know, at the beginning, everyone. Even you, I mean, you're now like American, so you almost talk like an American. You have an American wife. Soon we will have.
I still sound very much European during my accent. They tell me that. I like your background with the reel to reel. It reminds me of my good old days as a record producer.
The record producer of the Vaticanus Maximus.
Absolutely. So, like we said, today we have a new book. This is a new book. You can find it
Frankenstein
you can find it on Amazon.com, and it is about a totally unique and different perspective of the Epstein case. In fact, this book is already #1 in history of Judaism, Jewish history, espionage through accounts. It's really, I must say, it's being well received by both the academic world and also by journalists who have contacted me and told me this is a unique perspective, original, because we are not really analyzing, you know, I mean, what could I add to the thousands of articles or books that have already been published out there?
But this is different, and this is a different, listen. Show me the cover again, because I'm going to ask you something very important that you know about. This cover is very important because this cover shows Frankenstein, and
yes,
as
and
Robert Johnson, and has nothing to do with blues. In Masonic terms, according to Joseph Frank, according to the writer or waitress, because she wrote Frankenstein. Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was married to another guy from England that was actually an anarchist. It's very interesting, the whole story, but the story behind the name, the coding, the encrypted word Frankenstein, it means something.
Yes.
It means something. Actually, nobody knows this. That Frankenstein. What does Frankenstein mean?
If you want, I can give you a brief description of what, of course, you can also find in my book. But this description is also thanks to the work of the late Rabbi Antelman, who described the word Frank as standing for Jacob Frank, founder of the Frankists, of course. The N is an Anglican, let's say it's the abbreviation of the three-letter Hebrew word Ein, that means I in Hebrew, and the E resembles the first letter, and N is for the last, and Stein is in German means stone. So it's really symbolic of the all-seeing eye and the connection with the Illuminati, because Frank plus eye plus stone, and here we have the Sabbatean Frankist monster.
The eye on the stone, Frankenstein.
Yes,
it's like Palestine. It's like the phallus of the stone. Palestine, yeah.
Well, Epstein or many, you know, when you have either man or Stein, Ein, you know, these are, of course, words of connected to the Jewish community, because their surnames are connected inevitably to their alphabet and to the Kabbalistic interpretation, because, as you know, they are very much into gematria, the notaricon, the interpretation of the letters and of the numbers. The Sabbatean Frankist heresy, which we have discussed also with you in the past, starts really as an inspiration from the Lurianic Kabbalah, from Isaac Luria, who was himself a great Kabbalist, who will end up not only inspiring the unfortunate heresy of Shabbatai Zevi, but also later on also the let's say the prevalently Ashkenazi, Hasidic, Orthodox Jews who are nowadays very much present. When you're showing Frankenstein, you're showing, of course, the monster, which we never really know the real name of, because we know the name Dr. Frankenstein. By the way, Dr. Frankenstein, the creator of Frankenstein, in Mary Shelley's novel, goes to the University of Ingolstadt, the University of the Illuminati. So there is allegory, some symbology around this whole thing. It's
so
like
the doctor of the Illuminati. Is the doctor Frankenstein? Yes. Let's make it clear. Is the doctor of the from Ingolstadt in Gotha in the
well,
Illuminati,
I mean, like you know, in my past
city.
book, in volume 12, I talk about all the connections. Ignazio Loyola sent there the first Jesuits to fight the Reformation, and it became a very important center for the Jesuits, and of course the university that saw the establishment of the Order of the Illuminati. So the Order of the Illuminati are a little bit like the Frankenstein monster of Freemasonry. I mean, it came from, you know, from this milieu of Freemasons. There was a secret society that went completely out of control, that was created artificially in a way by adding bits and pieces by both Adam Weishaupt and Adolf Knigg. And so there is a symbology there, but there is also much more when it comes down to Frankenstein, because in fact in my book I focus very much on the connections that bring us from the Kabbalah to the connection of the golem, because Frankenstein is inspired by this mythological creature from Jewish folklore, typically an automaton made of clay, brought to life by these magical formulas of the Kabbalah to serve and protect its creator, but also to defend the Jewish community. The most famous story is, of course, the Golem of Prague, created by Rabbi Judah Loew ben Bezabel, who was himself this very eminent rabbi, very important rabbi. So Mary Shelley inspired
hang on, because you're going too very fast, and some people they can't follow you because you are on the advanced level, on this hyper mega turbo advanced level, and some people they're watching this, they're basic, they're starting to get into this because they just read some of your books. So if somebody new is watching this and starts like questioning the reality, they just woke up and they just received like a bang or something, they are like, what are they talking about? We're talking about a golem, an automaton, like a robot, like something can be made like the IA.
I'm putting you an image here that you can transfer on the screen. This is an image, a classic portrait of the creation of the golem, who, as you can see from this portrait, is created, is an illustration of the golem, which is, of course, with the letters of the Jewish alphabet, and manifests through the magical will of the rabbi. So the golems are really very important in our story, because Jeffrey Epstein is not only a pervert and a pedophilia maniac, a guy who, of course, set up a human trafficking ring of minors, dedicated mostly for also then the blackmail of the people involved. Jeffrey Epstein is also a mad scientist of sorts. And that side of Jeffrey Epstein is very important in my book, because Jeffrey Epstein is the one behind the creation of Sophia the robot, which is a little bit like an automaton. You were talking about the golem, in fact, but also we can talk about Frankenstein. And we should talk about then at that point the fact that Jeffrey Epstein wanted to inseminate with his DNA half of the planet, and he wanted to do it also with these experiments that were conducted in the underground tunnels placed under his residence in New Mexico, as well as the one in the island, the Little St. James Island, which also sees on the top this temple, which I describe is basically let's say a temple that Epstein constructed based on a temple in Aleppo, which is not a temple, it's actually a bathhouse, but was a very popular meeting ground for the Sabbatean Frankists. So I think that it's very important, this link with Frankenstein, because Frankenstein, both as the monster and as the doctor who goes and creates him, but then of course this monster gets out of control. This monster that in a way was Jeffrey Epstein, when he gets out of control, the system brings him down. And who is behind Jeffrey Epstein? Now, my book is the only book, and in fact, that's why it's having a great success and is #1 in all these charts, because it's the only book in the world that talks about the background of the people who actually constructed out of thin air the Jeffrey Epstein phenomenon. Because Jeffrey Epstein wasn't himself the guy responsible for suddenly having a big building in the center of New York or a private island or this and that. There were people behind him who aided and abetted his rise. And those people, as I explained, they were all part of the Sabbatean Frankist sect. And in fact, in the early 90s, in 91...
And the fire, we see the fire there. We see the fire during the movie. Is Prometheus some kind of part of this Shelley novel that also Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, they bring about, like Prometheus?
Yes, because the name of Frankenstein, let's never forget that you know, the original name is the modern Prometheus as well as Frankenstein. These are the two titles that Mary Shelley gave to this. And the husband of Mary Shelley was somebody who apparently was himself involved in the Illuminati and in secret societies, so he had a kind of a vast knowledge of sorts. This novel came out, this Gothic novel, in 1818, just a few years after the death of Jacob Frank. Of course, is also inspired by the Frankenstein castle, which exists, which is a castle overlooking the city of Darmstadt in Germany, which was also an inspiration, because in this castle apparently there was a series of alchemical experiments that had been conducted. Now, Frankenstein is a German name consisting of two words. The Franks are Germanic tribe, and Stein, like we said, is stone. But that is the official meaning that, you know, today the historians want to give, when instead, thanks to Rabbi Antelman, thanks to other Jewish historians, we arrive to the fact that Frank instead is not only the Franks, meaning the original group of Germanic people living near the Rhine River, but also the Sabbatean Frankists. Let's not forget that the Ashkenazi were also very much present in the lived near the Rhine River. And let's also not forget that there is a lot of confusion about, like we said in the past, the Khazarian, the Ashkenazis, and an hypothetical plot. In my book, I show that the Ashkenazis were actually the first ones to actually fight the Sabbatean heresy, and they did it with their most eminent rabbis, while instead there is rabbis who I expose in my book, who still today the Jewish community somehow wants to protect. So here we have the inspiration for Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley, who of course then marries and becomes also very much close to Lord Byron, to John Polidori that you're showing, but of course Percy Shelley, we don't have to forget that he also had written a very important book which in some way is connected to all this, because he is this romantic poet that we all talk about, but he had also written about the wandering Jew. The wandering Jew is another important theme that is touched by Shelley, and it is actually the Wandering Jew, a poem which apparently inspired also Mary Shelley, though it wasn't published until much later on. The Wandering Jew, let's not forget, is a very important, let's say, figure that somehow can be analyzed also through the lens of our interpretation, because in our analysis we have Mary Shelley who puts together Frankenstein, but then we have the husband who puts together something that has to do with a very important, because we have the Wandering Jew and we have the Wandering Jews, of course. What is the Wandering Jew? The Wandering Jew is, in the original legend, a mythical, immortal man who, in the original legend, was who Jesus basically, on the way to the crucifixion, cursed, so he will walk the earth until the second coming. Then we have, of course, the fact that the Wandering Jews become also later on another book which instead talks about the fact that the Jews never really had a land of their own. And in my book I explain how the Sabbatean Frankists really are very much entrenched with the culture, the basis of the very foundation of the land of Israel. So the Zionist element that Theodor Herzl formalizes with the creation of a movement, but Theodor Herzl himself talks about Shabbatai Zevi in one of his most important novels, which, by the way, also inspired the name of the city of Tel Aviv. So we have a lot, of course, to discuss, but the Frankenstein novel is an allegory fueled with symbolism that are both connected to the history, of course, of the Jews, as well as the Illuminati. Let's not forget, in my book, I explain how the Sabbatean Frankists created their own branch of the Illuminati, the Asiatic Brethren. Let's not forget that Frankfurt became this very important city for the future banking cartel of the planet. And that is the city in which Jacob Frank arrived, received like some kind of a hero or god, because he was recognized as the Messiah by his followers. Offenbach am Main in Germany is the place in which he then took base But it is the city of Frankfurt, a very important city for families like the Rothschild, but many other families. In fact, I explain in my book very much in detail who are these families. And so we go really very deep here. People who are watching will have to read the 300 pages of this book to understand to the fullest what I'm saying. I'm only scratching the surface here, as you can imagine. But we are in front of a phenomenon which is very, not very much discussed outside of the Jewish world. For 40 years, actually, Jacob Frank led his followers, often changing his teachings and the purpose of the Messianic mission. For example, at the beginning, like I explain in my book, he didn't want his followers to marry anybody other than themselves. So he restricted, the whole thing. Then he saw that the rabbinical authorities who had them arrested for 13 years, as well as the Inquisition, were on his case. And so at that point, he gives permission to marry outside of their faith. And what do? They, of course, had converted to the Catholic faith. So they devise an idea, which is very important, I think, in our story. And the idea is that he will, when you convert the Catholic faith and you are Jew, and he got 20,000 Jews to convert to the Catholic faith, you will embrace the surname of your godfather. And in that way, you could infiltrate and take over the surnames of many important Catholic, noble, aristocratic, even royal families around Europe. And so this is really the monstrosity of it, that of course we have Bishop who creates the Illuminati. As you know, the Illuminati were short-lived with that name, but then after they took over a series of other names. One of the people, though, who was involved with this whole thing was that because also when it comes down to Jacob Frank and what happened, he rented the castle of the Princess of Isenburg in Offenbach. And at that point, the biggest Jewish heresiarch, which claimed to be the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi, to Baruchia Russo, which claimed to be himself also the reincarnation of Shabbatai Zevi, he had brought the Sabbatean heresy to a next level. The next level, of course, here you're showing also the Faust, a very important element. If we also count in this story Goethe, who becomes a member of the Illuminati and all that. But when it comes to Jacob Frank, he had a relative who was Moses Dobruska. His mother was the first cousin of Jacob Frank. He founded he basically entered a Masonic lodge known as the Knights of St. John the Evangelist for Asia in Europe, which is the Asiatic Brethren. And then this group will become very much inspirational, even for people like Shelley, even for people like Aleister Crowley, because Aleister Crowley, for example, joins the Ordo Templi Orientis, which itself in the foundation documents claims to be inspired by the Asiatic Brethren. What were these Asiatic Brethren? Were basically the first attempt to introduce a Jewish element within Freemasonry in places like Germany, which, as you are showing, were bastions of alchemy, but also of the Jesuits, of Catholicism, as well as Protestantism, and didn't necessarily want to let the Jews inside their lodges of Freemasonry. So there was this for the first time with Moses Dobruska, this guy who changed his name many times. We don't really have an image of Moses Dobruska, but he was a mysterious character. He went by many names. One of his names was Junius Frey. As Junius Frey, he will eventually end up accused of espionage and executed by the guillotine in France during the Revolution. And that happened also on behalf of the Illuminati. So
I want to ask you a question here, because
yes,
1931 we have a film, and this is related to your argument and narrative. And Bela
yes.
Lugosi wears these we were seeing there. He wears this amulet, this medallion, and the connection between Bela Lugosi and the Star of David stems from this medallion that he wore as Dracula in the
I can give
1931
you
film.
actually the direct relation to the Sabbatean Frankist if you want. The direct
That's why I'm
relation is,
asking you,
yeah.
because that's the Sabbatean Frankist. What do they have to do with this Star of David, and also vampirism? Because vampirism is quietly associated with some
Sure,
Judaism.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, the B'nai Brit, which in reality, if interpreted in the correct way, means Sabbatai is my illumination, was this paramasonic or quasi-Masonic order, which the Jews eventually established after the Asiatic Brethren, because they were rejected by many lodges. They were trying to seek acceptance within the lodges of Freemasonry and so on. And so here in America, in New York, in the early 19th century, they gave birth to the B'nai Brit, which is today the biggest fraternal organization in Jewish history. And the B'nai Brit started to open lodges in Hollywood. And in Hollywood, they took control of all the production houses. And so basically, in fact, as you know, I wrote a whole book about also Hollywood and the entertainment business, which is volume 8 of my Confessions. But these lodges opened by the B'nai Brit became the ones that produced the movies like the one we saw with Bela Lugosi. So obviously there is a connection there, a connection which is with the world's oldest and largest Jewish service organization, founded in New York in 1843 by a number, I think 12, of the Jewish immigrants of German descent, who actually hardly spoke English. They spoke prevalently German. In fact, initially it was known as the Bundesbrüder, the Brothers of the Covenant. And they did it because they wanted to help the Jews. But this organization in reality is a Sabbatean Frankist organization. Those Germans who went to New York were very much connected to Adam Weishaupt, very much connected with the Illuminati, very much connected with the basis of the of German socialism, and what then we have with Karl Marx. I mean, Karl Marx is a Jew.
The Fabian Society, the Fabian Society.
After also, but that is a bit later on, let's say, in our story. Karl Marx, though, is, you know, I mean, he's the father of the manifesto, of the Communist Manifesto. And in fact, in my story, I explain how he was himself a product of the Jewish Enlightenment, the Akshara, as they know it, which in turn is also a product of people who were profoundly influenced by Sabbatai Zevi and Jacob Frank, like Moses S., like this character here, this gentleman here. So Karl Marx is basically a product of Sabbatean Frankism. But even the French Revolution, in a way, is a product of Sabbatean Frankism, because the history of Jacobinism, but even the history of it could have never been the same without Moses Dobruska, for example. The philosophie sociale, the philosophie sociale is
the social philosophy, they call it. Yeah.
It's very important within the context of what happens later on. Not much has been discussed in regards to the, you know, I mean, Moses Dobruska was definitely a very secretive guy, but he was himself not only a relative of Jacob Frank through his mother, he was also a relative of another very important guy who was involved in one of the biggest controversies regarding the Sabbatean Frankists, and this was Rabbi Jesuit. And this rabbi, he was actually, I think, the niece, not the niece, I think, of this rabbi. And this rabbi is very important in our story, and I explain why in my book, because he was the one who wrote one of the most important texts for the Sabbatean Frankists, which was a book called the Babo Ayom El Ain. Now, this rabbi is still to this day very much respected, because the controversy erupted against him with the accusation of being a Sabbatean Frankist. But because he was such an influential guy within the Jewish community, the traditional rabbinic leaders feared, of course, that exposing Eberschut's work. Eberschutz, it's a guy who, let me see if I can find for you an image that we can maybe show to our viewers, because, like I said, his book, based on on Sabbatai Zevi, became the most influential book to this day of the. Here we are. And
remember,
it says,
Sabbatai Zevi, just to make an asker as a footnote here, was
yes,
the one that in 1666, declared himself as the only Messiah after Jesus or whatever. And
okay, no, let me correct you here. Let me correct you.
Okay,
It was
correct me.
actually 10 years earlier, 11, I think, or whatever, that he declared himself in Gaza with Nathan of Gaza, who was his
Nathan of Gaza, yes.
Yes, he declared himself to be the Messiah of the Jews, and he was followed at the time by more than half of the Jewish population in the world. But in 1666, he was forced to declare himself Muslim because the Sultan threatened him to chop his head off if he didn't convert. So the history, though, in my book, you have the revelations that are nowhere to be found, even in the works of Gershon Scholem, who was this eminent historian, one of the most known when it comes to to those who have touched on the history of the Sabbatean Frankists, because I reveal the background of Mordecai Zevi, the father of Sabbatai Zevi, who himself was connected and working in Smyrna for the Puritans of Oliver Cromwell. So this you can find here, because in the end, you would see that in reality, it was the origins of this evil, like you're showing. Gershon Scholem is definitely one of the most powerful assets as an historian that we can base our work on, but there is also others, of course. But when it comes to Mordecai Zevi is a very important figure in this story, because he was the one who will influence his son, and he will actually given let's say the basic knowledge that they made him claim this Messiah position. Yes. And why? Because at the time there was a guy called who was very big within the Jewish. He was called the ambassador of the Jews. I think his name was Ben Israel, Benasse Ben Israel. I think. Let me see if I can find an image of him. Or he is a very important guy in our story. Why? Here we have his image. Let me show it to you. I put it here so you can maybe share it. I have it on the. Here it is. See? This guy here became very important, Menasse Ben Israel. Very important because he based his work on somebody else who now we're going to reveal is a Marranos. Marranos, of course, for those who don't know, we have he wasn't a Marrano. He was actually a very known and renewed
what is a Marrano? Because it comes from the golden age of Spanish literature and enlightenment. And then you have the Marranos, those converted to Judaism.
You have a difference.
To Christianity, Catholicism, right?
You have basically these two You have the conversos and the marranos, and there's a difference here that needs to be explained.
What is the difference between the conversos and the marranos? The marranos, they moved to Rafa Nadal's house in Majorca, and the other ones to Vatican in Italy, or what happened to them?
No, it's not only that. It's actually the fact that the marranos didn't convert genuinely. They actually converted to the Catholic faith, but continued to practice the Jewish faith in secret, while instead the conversos converted genuinely, meaning that they embrace fully Catholicism. Now, this guy who I've showed you, Menasseh ben Israel, who was this Jewish scholar, rabbi, Kabbalist, he opened the first Hebrew printing press named Emet Meretz Tisma in the Netherlands. Is a very important figure in a story because he will pick up the concept. I mean, here we are talking about the very basis of Zionism. Zionism, as we know it, would not have existed without Menasseh ben Israel, who convinced Oliver Cromwell, who, as you know, took over England for a brief period, the Great Britain, and made it into a republic by chopping the head of the king. But this guy, Menasseh ben Israel, was contacted by Cromwell's associates, and he himself was a very important figure in a story, because he said he convinced Oliver Cromwell to let the Jews back after a few hundred years. They had been banned since I think the 14th century, 13th century, they had been banned from England. So there was a Marranos involved in all this, though, and that is where we're going here. So the Marranos involved in this story was the guy who actually influenced Ben Israel, and it was Isaac Laprière. Isaac Laprière, maybe I can find an image of him, was a Marranos. And Isaac Laprière was a guy who had written a book explaining that the Jews had to go back to Israel. And you see, this is very important, because here we are, people think that the Jews always wanted to be, go back to their promised land. And that is a big, big lie. In reality, there was this Isaac Laprière who introduced Ben Israel, the other guy so Isaac Laprière basically introduced the guy Menasseh ben Israel through a book to the fact that the Jews had to be brought first back to England, and that happened with, of course, Oliver Cromwell, and then after bring them back to Israel. And the Puritans were very much into this whole thing. So
that Israel, that was not a physical place, because it was sometimes in Lithuania, sometimes in Poland, sometimes in Ukraine, sometimes in Ravenna in Italy.
Let's say that at the time, and you are of course stating it here, there was a lot of confusion on where Israel was supposed to be, but we know that when it comes down to people like, for example, then Nathan of Gaza and Shabbatai Zevi, of course, he was in Gaza, he was in Palestine, and Jerusalem is in Palestine. So, I mean, Jerusalem is there, it's not in Madagascar. However,
Jerusalem, I know, that's from the 20th century narrative, but the medieval times narrative is that the Bosphorus in Turkey, Anatolia, was Jerusalem, because they have the Crusades there also. And Ravenna, there is some documents from the Vatican that Ravenna, it was where the Virgin Mother Mary and Joseph had the Jesus, in Ravenna, or whatever you call it, in Italy, right?
There was a lot of different, but when it comes down to, let's say, the current narrative, it goes back to this Menasseh ben Israel, this Dutch-based Jewish founder, which I talk about in my book, who wrote an astonishing, he basically had a printing house, and he convinced Cromwell's secretary that it was so irrelevant for the Jews to go back to England, where they were banned for several centuries up until then. And at that point, Sadler published also a book, an astonishing book called The Rights of the Kingdom. Why this book is astonishing? Because it introduces British Israelism, meaning they believe that the English were or the Scottish or other were the lost tribe of Israel. So it is, of course, an artificial construction, but this, in a way, was of help. Then there was Manasseh ben Israel, who published a book called The Hope of Israel, and The Hope of Israel was very important because, like we said, brought to the discussion between Oliver Cromwell and Manasseh ben Israel as ambassador of the Jews that led to the English going back to England, but only as a temporary passage to then go back to Israel. Now, who were the people who were in charge of Israel after the Ottoman Empire? The English. They were in charge of Palestine. So it was, and then the Balfour Declaration, where was it made? In England. The Rothschild were Sabbatean Frankists who married and nobilitated themselves where? In England. So you see the British Israel World Federation and everything that goes along with it. So there is definitely a link, but this link starts, first of all, from Manasseh ben Israel, but it goes back to Isaac Laprière, who had written, who was this Jewish converse Marrano, who was very influential, and who was really influential also because he was connected to the Jesuits. So here we have, once again, also a connection with the Jesuits and the very early days of what will become Zionism. So Zionism later on becomes, in the 19th century, something that the English system will kind of, in a way, will influence the Jews, who then themselves created, of course, with Theodor Herzl, the Zionist movement. I have here a couple of, I think I showed you maybe in the past, a couple of, a big encyclopedia of Zionism in 2 volumes. And eventually, see, here, these are 2 books, and they are, as you can see, the Encyclopedia of Zionism and Israel. And the guy who is ascribed with being the most influential guy is, of course, the guy who created the movement itself, who was this gentleman, who was Theodor Herzl, this guy here.
Because rumor says, as you know, Leo, that Babylon is Babylon, that is the old Rome, is in Babylon, in London, that the English flag or the British flag is from the tribes of Jacob, Isaac, that is the Saxons. We have Theodore there.
This guy here is Theodor Herzl, and he's very important because
he's supposedly founder of Zionism, of the Priory of Zion.
In reality, my book explains he wasn't even the inventor of the name Zionism, that was invented prior to him by another Jewish figure, who actually invented the name and then regretted it because he went back to Orthodox Judaism. What happens is that, you see, when you create Zionism, the idea was to bring together. In the meantime, you have the Israels, of course, the Israel in Britain, the British Israelism that convinced,
because it's a great country. It's a great, Leo, and you know, you come from them too because you're related to the family, the royal family.
Sure.
You have Great Britain. When Abraham told Jacob, "You will have a great country. You will have a Great Britain." A Britain of the Barats, of the Baal, or whatever you want to call it.
But one thing, Colin, one thing is that there was a little bit of an artificial construct here that wasn't there in any, wasn't then revealed by any DNA study. I mean, today, if we go back to the studies in DNA, we cannot prove that there was ever a Jewish Khazarian, because we explained this in the past. The Khazarians, for example, embraced Judaism. I'm just explaining you this. That in the 19th century, when British Israel became so popular in England, it was also to convince the English to give their support So they could then, of course, later on push the idea, which materialized with the Balfour Declaration and later on, of course, with the foundation of Israel, that they were somehow part of it. But in reality, there is no DNA evidence that the Anglo-Israel, the British nation, the lost tribe. I mean, what you're showing now is a book that I actually have here. I'll show you. Watch. It's from the end of the 19th century. Watch here. This book here that you just showed.
But you can't deny.
Watch.
You can't deny.
Watch.
That many British and many Irish claim they are the original Irish in concept. I mean, the Druids, they were like the agents and the initiators of what now they call Judaism, right?
No, but in fact, in this book here, in particular, it shows the similarities between Druidism and the Jewish faith and the festivities that every year the Druids and the Jews have. But the thing is that aside from anything else, this was also made in a way to kind of tame the very much the anti-Semitic field of the past, because England, I repeat, up until Oliver Cromwell, for a few centuries, they had kicked out the Jews out of the whole country. For a few centuries, I mean, they were not.
It was not only Spain. Spain was the bad player, bad guy. Spain, everyone says Spain kicked out the Muslims and the Islam and the Jews and whatever. They're baddies. They're anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim, anti-whatever. So now it happens that Germany kicked them out, Russia kicked them out, England kicked them out, Italy kicked them out, France kicked them out, the Netherlands or Holland, whatever it's called, I don't know, the Low Countries, they change the fucking name, like the Basque Country every fucking day. So the Holland, they kicked them out. Everyone kicked them out. Why did they kick them out? That's what I want to know. I mean, are they British in the end, Irish bad guys? Are they Semitic? But because Netanyahu is not Semitic.
Personally,
the other guys are German. I mean, who didn't?
Personally, I will ascribe to the fact that, of course, if the Jews had to come from somewhere, they came first of all from Egypt, because that's where Moses brought them out of the country. Now, of course, we can say that they were enslaved or they were not enslaved, but
or is that a metaphor like Frankenstein?
No, but I mean,
Moses,
I think that it's very important.
Moses. You know, Leo, I have to ask these questions. I have to be questioning all the narratives because, I mean, we are. Yes, I know the book of the beginning, right? But nobody, in fact, when they say in Europe, Leo, I'm asking you a question. Judeo-Christian, they say the society of Western societies are Judeo-Christian. They're not Judeo-Christian because nobody fucking pay attention to the Hebrew Bible. The Romans and the Greeks, they were pagan. The Druids, they were pagan. Nobody read the fucking Hebrew Bible until the 19th century.
No, wait a second.
No, and then came Christ.
No. I will say Judeo-Christian. No, Colin. Bear with me a second. Stay with me a second here. The Jews had the biggest community in Europe in Rome, out of all cities, and still to this day, the Jewish community.
How many millions? How many millions? They're only like 6 million now, or 9 million. How many?
But they have a big community in
paganism. That was Christianity.
But the Jewish community in Rome, the Jewish ghetto, existed for 2,000 years. I mean, the fact that the Jews.
How many people, Leo? How many people? How many people? 1,000, 2,000, 100,000.
But in the end, you have to understand that the modern studies in DNA, that is what we have to base our research from. So does it exist a DNA for the Jews? Yes, in the Sephardic and Ashkenazi, and also in the Yemeni.
I'm not denying the fact that they exist and they have some relation because they are all incestual. I mean, the good thing about Christianity is they came to our tribe and they said,
but
guys,
regardless of the religion,
you have to mingle with other people because otherwise you're fucking ugly and you're stupid.
Colin,
you understand? Catholicism helped, but listen, Leo, Christianity helped that we came out of the tribe and we could meet blonde girls from Sweden and we could meet Italian girls and we could meet Ukrainian girls. Otherwise, we would marry the fucking our sister and our mother.
Okay, let's go back to the history of Christianity. The history of Christianity has two cities. Jerusalem and Rome. So we can't really go out of that.
But where
It
is
comes-
Jerusalem? Where is Rome? Because Rome, it changed many times, places.
No.
Rome was in
Rome-
Alexandria. Rome was in Turkey. Rome was in Troy. Rome was in Avignon. Rome was in Ravenna.
Rome is
What do you
Rome.
mean? Which Rome? Rome was
I
in
mean,
Moscow.
the Rome of the ancient Romans. I was born in Rome on the Seven Hills, so don't tell me where
That
is
Rome, Leo, but sorry to disagree, to agree. That Rome is very recent, because
No.
RM is Abraham. RM is Abraham. Abraham is the father of Rome. Abraham.
Okay,
I mean,
first of all,
before they didn't have vowels. Everyone
Okay,
reading
but
books
Rome-
before the 13th
Rome-
century, they were reading consonants. So if you
Okay,
have
first-
A, you don't have A. You have BRM. BRM is the father of Rome. If you have RM, you
Colin.
had Romulus and Remus, right?
Okay.
I'm not trying to discredit that you're from Rome. That is a great
First
city.
First of all,
Where are the ruins of the original Rome with St. Peter?
Okay,
There is
first
no
of all,
original.
Rome.
Are they ruins there? The
original
Trojan
name.
column is not
let me
real.
tell you. Okay, first of all, the original.
Rome didn't exist, Leo.
No.
Rome didn't
Colin,
exist until
Colin.
Mussolini. It's an invention of Leo and Mussolini and Alex Jones. obviously.
No. Okay, Colin.
Defend
Rome-
the case. Defend the case.
Okay, first of all, Rome is the real name of Rome was never revealed ever to anybody outside of the high priest of Rome for a simple reason, and that is because it was believed in the ancient times that whoever knew the protector of the city, and in this case the real name of Rome will then define who was the god who will protect the city. So the name Rome was used externally, but in reality the real name of Rome would be always known only to a limited few, okay? And those limited few will protect the real name with their own lives and transmit it only orally. And for that reason, we don't really know the real name of Rome. So Rome stays Rome, but the real name of Rome will be always secret, because the Romans were very much believers that if anybody knew the name of Rome, they could evoke the god in charge of Rome, and they will at that
But
point.
you acknowledge the fact. Sorry, Leo, to interrupt.
Yeah.
You acknowledge the fact, because I want to bring this to this audience to question more things, even from the past. You acknowledge the
Yes.
fact that before there was only consonants until the Greeks supposedly came in the Middle Ages or something like that. They started reading these texts that we don't have. We only have copies because the originals there disappeared. We don't know where they are. They have RM. They have the Tarquinian War in Rome that we don't know Rome, but he didn't say Tarquinian. He said TRQN. That it could be the Franks, and the Franks that were
Rome
FRN.
is also an
So
anagram
FPT,
of
and T could be T.
Rome is the anagram of amor, which is love. Amor, but it's also the anagram of amor, meaning also Mars, because it was Mars, the protector
Mars
of
also,
Rome.
of course.
Okay, so the god of war goes and protects, of course, the Romans, who then conquer and establish the biggest empire that, of course, is at the basis of our Western civilization. So when you say Judeo-Christian, you have to understand that the Jews and Rome were always connected. In fact, the symbol, going back to what you asked earlier about the Star of David, that was never really the symbol of the Jews, but was actually the symbol that the Sabbatean Frankists gave for, as a symbol. That's why I have it also here, in the sixth star. Now, the real symbol
of Frankenstein.
The real symbols of the Jews is the menorah, and the menorah was shown, and the one that is the real symbol of Israel, as you find it in ancient Rome, depicted there. And in fact, is the depiction that the menorah of ancient Rome is the one that is the real symbol of not only of Judaism but of Israel. So
Amen Ra.
The
menorah is Amen Ra.
Today,
menorah is Amen Ra.
Okay, but
reverse,
regardless
right?
of
It's
the
like
interpretations. Yeah, but
But
the
am I right or
menorah.
not, Leo? Because
No, but I mean, we could go into the origins of every single Hebrew word, but that is not the pertinent to what we are discussing today. The menorah is a powerful symbol of Judaism, is the most prominently the official emblem of the state of Israel today, and is deeply connected to the nation's history. But if we had to, where is the temple,
Seti the first and the African, and the African tribes, they have the candles in doing the ritual for the Jews. No,
okay, we have, I mean,
you got to
a
stop.
lot of.
Leo,
Uh,
can you hear me?
I
I know
could
you
hear
got
you.
shocked. The audience here, they're telling me, relax, bro. Don't attack Leo. I'm saying, no. I'm doing this for the show because this is a show. Don't worry. And Leo's my
No,
friend.
but it's
I'm
not,
doing this for
it's not a
questioning
problem.
and going even beyond this.
No, it's a problem. I mean,
People,
we are
they're pissed off.
discussing, we are bringing out,
Look, relax.
things. In regards to the menorah,
Yeah,
we
it's
also
good to
know.
debate.
No, of course, but that is part of the show. It's not a problem. Now, in the Talmud, there was a sign that the Shekinah rested among Israel. Now, the Shekinah is also a very important element in my book because the Shekinah is this presence of God, which becomes also the female
Shekinah.
aspect.
Don't even go there. I show you Donald Trump doing the Shekinah.
No, because in Judaism,
where is the Shekinah, Leo? Explain that, because that's very. What is Shekinah? The real truth, Leo. Don't go around the bush. We want to know what Shekinah and the devil have to do with it.
Now, in regards to my book here, I write about Ghislaine Maxwell in relation to the Shekinah, just as Eve Frank, the daughter of Jacob Frank, was defined as the Shekinah. The Shekinah is the dwelling or settling in a special sense of dwelling of the divine presence, and it is a very important element. Also because it's a feminine word in Hebrew, but it's also featured in a masculine or androgynous way. And it is very important because the divine feminine principle in Judaism is the Shekinah, and the Shekinah is present also in the lodges of the OTO, for example, in the original OTO of Theodore Royce. But also the Shekinah, like I said, is connected to the female Messiah, who Jacob Frank said was his daughter, Eve Frank. Now, we might disregard all this as rubbish, but in reality, Eve Frank became the first and only female Messiah. And aside from that, there is also another thing that is very relevant to our story. Ghislaine Maxwell herself was thought to be the Shekinah by Epstein and his followers. Just recently, when she was moved to another prison, she was visited by a group of very powerful people in the chapel. Ghislaine Maxwell was also received in a private audience with Jeffrey Epstein by the Polish Pope, future Saint John Paul II. So this is really more, I think, interesting and pertinent to what we are discussing. We can, of course, go back and talk about, the Torah, the Shekinah, the temple, and many other things.
We have to talk about the Shekinah and this penis head going back and forth to the wall, representing this. I mean, I didn't say this. You know who said this too? Brother Nathaniel. You know Brother Nathaniel?
Yes.
He used to be Jewish, and now he's a Christian priest. You should have a talk with Brother Nathaniel. He's gonna be great. He's gonna be great.
I mean, great pleasure. If you can organize that, it will be.
I'm gonna hook you up with Brother Nathaniel.
Absolutely. In any
Leo,
case,
your book is great. Like any other book, you learn a lot about your book. You learn about Frankenstein. We want people to buy this book. Show the book. Show the book. The Rise and Fall of Frankie's
Frankist
monster. That's Jeffrey
monster,
Epstein.
yes, exposing Jeffrey Epstein and the most powerful Jewish sect in the world, is now #1 new release in Jewish history, in history of Judaism, in espionage through accounts, and many other categories on Amazon. I think you will learn a lot from this book today. Of course, it was nice also to have this show confrontation with Colin, which is always enriching us.
Don't reveal my sources, man.
Provocation.
I never lose a debate. You know, I always gain knowledge. It's like you, Leo. You never lose a debate. You know why you don't lose a debate? Because you always gain knowledge. In the end, you always gain knowledge. And Leo, I know he wants to go easy on this one to the next book, but you know, guys, the purpose of this show is to go really strong. I mean, we are Latin people. We are, you know, with a lot of European spirit and energy, you know, and we have to go strong on this one. He was very straight.
Are you a conversos?
No, I'm a fucking marrano. I don't take showers like the English.
Okay, you are a marrano.
Because marrano in Spanish means pig, means dirty. That's why marrano, they were called these conversos, because these conversos didn't. But hey, if Israel puts some money on the table, I go. I mean, I go blind, you know, like, hey, guys, you have some money, you give me money, I promote you. There's no problem. I don't care if you're Jew, Christian, or pagan. I mean, I don't give a shit. No.
Well, when it comes to money, we know that
when it comes to money, man. I mean, I'm fucking skin. I'm fucking skin like you, Leo. Look, Israel or ISIS, menorah. Do whatever the fuck you want. You want me to go to the Wailing Wall? I go to China. I go to the Wall of China and do the Shekinah with the Chinese. The Chinese, I go there. I do the Shekinah. No fucking problem. But send me some fucking cash. Send us cash and buy the book. Buy the book.
Absolutely buy the book. Thank you so much for having me on, and God bless you. See you for the next show, Colin. All the best. Rafa Pal, he needs to learn English so we can have a chat together on this show.
I know.
Take care.
Thank you, Leo. Bye. All the time. Just, you know. It's a pleasure to meet the devil. Yeah? Nice to meet you guys. Well, nice to see you again. And we'll see you next week. We're going to have nice people around here. Hey, and send money. I don't know. Send me 1 million, 2 million. I mean, not million. $1. That's not me. I'm a carnivore, so send me meat. Send me bacon. Send me the bacon. Send me the big fucking sirloin steak. Big kiss, everyone. Bye. I see you on the Occult Roots show. Forever.
And I was round when Jesus Christ had his moment of doubt and pain. Made damn sure that politics washed his hands and sealed his fate.